Do you know that there is a scientific method that could help you improve your learning speed by up to 200 to 250%? Can you guess what it is? It is the flow state. This video will be split into 3 parts. In the first part, we will explain and explore what flow state is. Secondly, we're going to talk about why it is important to get into the flow state and why do I do it on a day-to-day basis. Step 3, we'll talk about how you could get into the flow state, especially when you're studying. Are you ready? Let's go! So, what is the flow state? Some people call it being in the zone, some people call it the most productive state you could be in, and some people even call it the secret to happiness. The official description of the flow state is by Hungarian-American psychologist Mihaly, the father of flow. He says that the flow is a stage where people are so immersed in their activities that nothing else seems to matter. The experience is so enjoyable that people would continue to do it even at a great cost. Flow is characterized by 4 things: intense focus, concentration of the task, enjoyment of the task, and a sense of control. A lot of top athletes has described the feeling of flow when they're practicing or when they're competing in competitions. There are even some theories that suggest that the reason top athletes tend to do better than other athletes who spend the same amounts of time practicing or even more amounts of time practicing is because they're more constantly in the flow. Being in the flow can make you much more productive, and that means you can achieve the same amounts of work by studying 1 hour than other people who study double or even triple the amounts of time. You have probably felt the flow state before. Probably when you're having a really good conversation with people, or when you're playing a game, when you're really focusing, or when you're playing some sports or musical instruments, and you feel like time just flies. My student described the flow state as a state where they could focus better, learn faster, absorb information better, and memorize information faster. The most important thing is, it feels good to be in a flow state. When you're in the flow, time just flies by, and you get things done a lot quicker. By the way, if you find this video useful, please click like and subscribe to this channel now. This would help us produce more great content to help make learning more enjoyable and fun. The feelings of being in the flow state are all related to what's happening in our brain. What happens is that the activities in our frontal lobe decrease. There is less blood flow to this area. This state is called transient hypofrontality. Let's unpack this complicated scientific term. The word hypo is actually ancient Greek. That means a little or less than normal. Frontality is actually Latin, which means at the front. Here is referring to the frontal lobe of our brain, or the prefrontal cortex, which is in this part of our brain. During the flow state, you will experience transient hypofrontality, which means that for a little while, the front part of your brain get a little break, and the other area of your brain is more fired up and working more efficiently. That way, your energy is redirected to focus on learning and help you absorb information better and faster. In a study of classical pianists, they find that the musicians who are in the flow state, they normally breathe deeper, have a slower heart rate, and they activate the muscles that allow them to smile. Comments below to let me know whether or not you have felt the flow states before and how it feels for you. So, we have talked about what the flow state is. Let's explore why it is so important. First, it's linked with general happiness. Mihaly concluded that people are most happy when they're in the state of flow. Learning how to tap into flow is extremely important to you feeling happy in your day-to-day life. Second point is life satisfaction. Life satisfaction is a bit similar to general happiness. Obviously, if you're happier in life, you'll become more satisfied with life. What I want to get across here is that people are not only happier in life, they're also more passionate about life when they are constantly in the flow. It's not something that only makes them happy, it's also something that makes them feel like life is worth living for. Therefore, people who enter flow state more often are more satisfied with life. Point number 3, productivity. When you're in the flow state, you're much more productive. In fact, research shows that you will be 200 to 250% more productive than when you're working normally. If you're someone who actually get distracted by phone, by YouTube, or by other apps a lot when you're working, that difference would be even greater for you. Some students I coach used to take more than 5 hours to complete their homework and studies every night. The biggest reason why is that they're so distracted and they cannot focus when they're working. After I taught them how to get into the flow state, they were able to cut down the time to half within a month and cut it down to about 1 hour within 3 months. That is a difference of 5 times. Imagine what you could do with that extra 2 to 3 hours every evening. And you could achieve that just by learning how to tap into the flow state. Number 4, motivation. Learning how to tap into the flow would make you much more satisfied with your work, and work will feel a lot more rewarding. This feeling is almost addictive. For those of you who games, you probably know the feeling of how time just flies by when you're deep in the zone, when you're playing with friends. You feel like you just don't want to stop and you don't realize time is going by so fast. What if I told you you could achieve the same when you're studying? This is the big secret of doing well in school. Good students are just much better of getting into the zone, getting into the flow than other people. These feelings of satisfaction and accomplishment form a positive feedback loop. We all like to do what we're good at and what makes us feel good. And that's why they keep going back to studying. And they also study a lot more productively when they're in the flow. And that's how they seem to be studying not much and they seem to be getting good grades so easily. But that could be you too. Now that we know why this is so important, let me share with you how we could get into the flow easily. There are 5 things you need to take note of when you want to get into the flow. First, avoid external distractions. Turn off your phone and use website blockers. It takes about 15 minutes of deep work for you to get into the flow. What you need to watch out for are distractions, which could break the flow state. You really need to take notes that getting back into the zone takes time. A lot of students study with their phone next to them and check it every 5 minutes. And that will stop them from getting into the flow entirely. When you study, be sure to put your phone on flight mode or put it in another room. This is gonna feel weird initially and you'll feel the urge to use your phone, but you need to fight it. After a while, you will get used to not using your phone when you're studying. I recommend printing your notes if you can, or if you absolutely want to use your laptop to work, you could download the note and turn your laptop on flight mode. You could even use website blockers if you really need to use the internet. You also want to limit the use of this website during your break. You want to be taking a very effective break that would allow you to refresh and study better for your next study session, and only use whatever websites you want to do after your entire study session. After you're done with studying, you could do whatever you want. Secondly, you need to learn to avoid internal distractions. There are external distractions and internal distractions, and I feel like people are not giving enough focus and talking much about the internal distractions. Internal distractions are thoughts and chapters that pops up in your mind and stop you from focusing. For example, I know a lot of students have pretty negative self-image, especially when it comes to studying. They might think that they're bad at a particular subject, for example, maths. So what happened when they're studying maths is that they would look at the maths paper and think, oh, I'm so bad at maths, I'm not really good at this, I'm really slow at learning maths. These thoughts, unfortunately, would occupy all of their mind, leaving no room, no spare capacity for them to absorb and learn information. Do you think they could learn well under these circumstances? By improving your self-image and developing a growth mindset. I absolutely believe that we could do anything that we set our mind to. And that's what helped me to go from a student who failed 7 subjects to being a straight A student and eventually getting into medical school and becoming a doctor. If I could do that from having to retake a year, having failed almost every subject, I believe that you could definitely get the grades you want to. This topic deserves another video, but for now, I want you to remember that your past is not your future. One thing you could do now is to meditate regularly. This could help reduce the internal chatters and help you to learn to ignore the thoughts. Number 3, have a clear goal or plan your study session. In order to focus, you first need something to focus on. Most students don't spend enough time planning their study sessions. They sit at their desk blindly without a clear goal and aim, and that makes it really hard for them to focus. So if you want to go into the flow, you need to have a clear goal about what you're achieving. I typically spend around 5 minutes planning my session before I start. For example, instead of just wanting to finish your homework, I recommend taking a few minutes to look at what are the learning objectives you're trying to achieve here, establishing what you need to know by the end of the homework, and then setting your goal to not only complete your homework, but also to be able to answer those learning objectives by the end of it. Number 4, find tasks that are slightly challenging. In order to get into the flow state, you need to be stimulated. You need to do something that is actually challenging. If you're doing a very simple task and that's boring, it is difficult to stay focused. Your brain would not feel the need to direct more energy to help you at the task because it could fully do it with spare capacity. You need to plan your study session to make sure what you're learning is a little challenging but not too difficult. For example, if you're playing a simple, easy game that you just keep winning without any challenges, you'll probably lose interest after a while. On the other hand, if you're playing a game when you have no chance of winning, you would also probably lose interest after a while. However, if you're playing a game that is slightly challenging, that you have chance of winning but also at risk of losing, you would have a lot of adrenaline surge and you'll get really excited at playing. Think of it like a video game. Difficulty level should get progressively harder as you practice more, and that is a key part on keeping you hooked. Spending a few minutes designing your study session could absolutely make a huge difference. Number 5, 15 minutes of deep work. Research shows that you need around 15 minutes of deep work in order to get into the flow. If you are someone who finds it very difficult to focus, it might take even longer. The great thing is, practice will make it easier. It would help you reduce the amount of time to get into the flow. At the peak of my studying, it could take me less than 5 minutes to get into the flow. However, at its worst, I couldn't get into the zone, or it would take me really long time to get into the zone. But remember, practice makes perfect. If you want to learn more about getting into the zone, the flow state, comment below and let me know. Let's do a quick summary. Before you study, there are 5 things that you should be doing. First, put all external distractions, like your phone, away. Secondly, make sure to quieten your mind. I recommend meditating if your mind is especially chaotic. Number 3, plan your study session so you know exactly what you are going to learn. Number 4, make sure your planned work is challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not too difficult to make you feel demoralized. Number 5, make sure you work in a continuous focus state for more than 15 minutes. If you haven't liked and subscribed to this channel, do it now. See you next week.